At 50 years old, my life was marked by routine, a routine I shared with Raoul, my husband of the same age. The flame of passion and excitement that once united us had faded, leaving behind a monotonous and predictable existence. After 25 years of marriage, we woke up at the same time every day, shared a silent breakfast, and immersed ourselves in our respective daily occupations. Most of the time I had lunch alone at home, sometimes opting to go out and enjoy a meal elsewhere. The evenings became even more boring. Dinners lacked meaningful conversations, becoming more of formalities than moments of connection. We took refuge in television or our own thoughts, avoiding any real interaction. Sometimes I would look at old photos of us when we were young, when the spark of love made us smile just by looking at each other. I thought about the moments we shared, the laughter, and the dreams we built together. Where had that complicity gone? When had our lives become this monotonous? The routine not only affected our relationship but also reflected in our home. The same furniture, the same walls, the same decoration that had surrounded us for decades. My name is Lucia. I am of average height with brown eyes. My routine involves keeping the house tidy, and I find a creative escape in crafts using recycled materials. Despite always staying at home, I like to dress elegantly, take care of my hair, and paint my nails. The comfort of home does not mean sacrificing style for me. Dressing elegantly is more than a clothing choice, it is an expression of my self-love. And although the outside world may not see my clothes, I feel it as a personal celebration. Raoul, my husband, is a man of robust build with gray hair that adds a touch of distinction to his dark hair. He dedicates most of his time to his work in an office. His presence at home is reduced to mornings and evenings, the only moments when our lives coincide in the same space. He is more present by his absence than by his active participation in the moments we share together. A couple of weeks ago, the house's pipes started giving us problems. First the kitchen sinks, then the bathroom sinks, and finally the laundry area. In normal situations, Raoul, skilled in repairs, would take care of these setbacks. But this time, the urgency of the matter forced us to call a plumber. Diego, a 21-year-old young man, was in charge of fixing anything that was broken. With an average height, slim build, fair complexion, dark eyes, a defined jawline, and lips that often curved into a friendly smile, he wore the plumber's uniform, resistant blue pants and a short-sleeved white shirt. Diego's physique caught my attention, as we rarely received visits from unknown men at home. Our circle of visitors was limited to old friends, those with whom we shared dinners and some family gatherings on weekends. The days became intense with his constant presence in the house, and as I watched him handle the tools with skill, I began to feel a sense of vitality, something I had not experienced for a long time, immersed in the lack of intimacy in my marriage. My mind began to wander, to fantasize about the young man who was striving to bring normalcy back to our home. In those long hours when I was alone, I immersed myself in thoughts and fantasies that offered me an escape from the dull reality I shared with Raoul. One afternoon, while Diego was working, I decided to get closer to see his work up close, and I was impressed by his skill with tools and his meticulousness in every detail. His hands moved deftly, repairing everything that was broken. During a break, we struck up a casual conversation, and I discovered that Diego had a passion for plumbing and that, despite his young age, he had great skill in his trade. And from that moment on, I started looking for any excuse to exchange words with him. The next day, I decided to invite him to lunch, and unlike the routine dinners with my husband, the conversation with Diego flowed naturally. We explored dreams, passions, and life in general. At that moment I rediscovered the spark that had been lost, and I realized that I longed for the vitality and complicity that Diego was offering me. After lunch I remained at the table lost in my thoughts, while the boy resumed his work. In an unexpected stumble, his clumsy movements resulted in an accidental bump on my buttocks, creating a moment of tension and surprise. Diego, visibly embarrassed by the incident, quickly apologized, explaining that it was a simple accident. I tried to downplay the misunderstanding and change the subject to lighten the mood and resume the connection we had experienced during lunch. Throughout the afternoon I tried to get over the awkward moment, but I felt that the dynamic between us had subtly changed. Diego, for his part, also seemed more reserved, as if the misunderstanding had created a barrier between us. I decided to make an effort to restore the naturalness we had achieved before the incident, and during a break in his work, I proposed that we have coffee and go out to the garden. I wanted to clear the atmosphere and regain the fluidity in our conversation. As we sipped coffee, I noticed how the young plumber gradually began to relax. Reciprocally, I felt that I was also leaving behind the discomfort of the moment. And instead of distancing ourselves, we were getting even closer. That day, Raúl came home earlier than usual. The sound of the keys in the door echoed through the house, and although Diego quickly resumed his work, the knowing look between us betrayed what had happened. Soon after, the plumber announced that his workday was over and that he would continue the next day. That night I could barely sleep. The emotion generated by what had happened contrasted directly with the guilt that enveloped me. On the one hand, a part of me felt alive, ignited by the spark that had arisen with Diego. However, guilt gripped my thoughts, reminding me of my commitment to Raúl, my lifelong partner, oblivious to what was happening in his own home. Diego would return to the house, and this certainty added an additional layer of tension to my emotions. With the arrival of the new day, we shared breakfast as usual with Raúl. About an hour after he left for work, the doorbell rang, signaling Diego's arrival. This unusual break in the daily routine that had characterized my last years provoked a mixture of emotions. As I descended the stairs to greet him, anxiety manifested strongly, my heart pounded fast, and my breathing became agitated. Diego waited at the door with a warm smile. His greeting was kind, and once inside, he began to share details about his workday with me. Every gesture, every word was like a magnet that drew me towards him. That day we had lunch together again, and as we ate, he gently took my hand to thank me. The touch of his fingers on mine sent a shiver through my whole body, paralyzing me momentarily by the intensity of the contact. After we finished eating, Diego continued with his work and I, restless, began to tidy up the house. When I went to the kitchen, he approached me again, took my hand and said, "You can use the dishwasher now." My nervousness increased, but his hand remained on mine for several seconds until our eyes met. From there, words were scarce, the language of our bodies spoke clearly, and the connection between us manifested through subtle gestures. Diego and I surrendered to the moment, and with a serene expression, he slowly approached me. Our heads tilted and our lips were inches apart. The kiss, initially soft, was the confirmation of the connection that had been brewing over the days. He began to gently stroke my hair and my head, giving me delicate kisses on my hands. Each gesture of his was a caress that awakened deep sensations in me, and in those moments I let myself be enveloped by the pleasure, happy to feel the tingling in my body again. We continued to caress each other gently, just feeling the touch of our hands, until the sound of keys echoed. It was my husband. We chose to act naturally. Diego continued working while I made coffee. My nervousness grew. It was the first time I had done something like this to Raúl, an act that intensified the contradiction between reality and my hidden desires. That kiss marked the beginning of a double life for me, one in which I tried to keep up appearances in front of Raúl while secretly exploring a new reality full of emotions and passions with Diego. As the days passed, our clandestine relationship deepened even further, using the excuse of prolonging the repairs at home. However, guilt became a shadow that accompanied me. But the attraction and excitement that Diego awakened in me seemed to overshadow it momentarily. My relationship with Raúl continued its apparently normal course. We crossed paths in the daily routine, shared the table and the bed, but the emotional distance between us grew. The nights we spent together were quieter than ever, while my mind wandered between the love we once shared and the passion I was now living in secret. The secret became increasingly difficult to keep, and the tension manifested in small details, even in my constant smile. The duality of my life was becoming a dangerous game where every false step could reveal the truth. As the days passed, Raúl began to notice the changes in my behavior. Subtle questions about my day and gestures of concern revealed his intuition, but I tried hard to disguise, to hide reality. The relationship with Diego also became more complicated. The moments of ecstasy shared in secret clashed with the responsibility and commitment I had towards my husband. The contradiction settled within me, and the struggle between morals and passion intensified. One particularly tense afternoon, Raúl directly voiced his suspicions. My evasions were no longer enough, and faced with confrontation, I had to invent a story to justify the changes in my attitude. Raúl, confused, accepted my explanations. The double life I was leading began to weigh on my conscience. The guilt became unbearable, and the feeling of being trapped between two worlds became suffocating. It was one morning when Diego arrived at the house and unexpectedly greeted me with a kiss on the mouth. Surprised, I returned the gesture just as I realized that Raúl was behind Diego, observing the scene with surprise and bewilderment. The three of us remained in an awkward silence while Raúl and Diego's gazes crossed in a tense play of expressions. The reality of my double life was exposed, and the weight of the truth was reflected in Raúl's face, who broke the silence with a look of disbelief and pain. The words seemed to get stuck in his throat, unable to come out. Diego, on the other hand, showed a gesture of regret and surprise, perhaps not anticipating the consequences. I tried to articulate an explanation, but the words faded before they came out. The air became thick, and tears fell uncontrollably down my cheeks. Raúl, with his gaze lost on the floor, processed the scene he had just witnessed. Diego, on the other hand, chose to leave. My husband entered the house and sat on the couch, immersed in an overwhelming silence that was only broken by the distant murmur of the television. I approached and sat next to him, facing the weight of the situation. We began to talk about the exhausting cycle we were trapped in, an endless wheel of silent breakfasts, the absence of shared moments, and the lack of meaningful conversations that had defined our monotonous routine. And we came to the conclusion that the best thing for both of us was to separate. The decision hung in the air, but there was a silent resignation, a kind of relief at the possibility of freeing ourselves from the prison of routine and exploring new horizons separately. From that day on, my life was transformed. The separation from Raúl was not easy, but it was necessary for both of us. I began to rebuild my existence, trying to find meaning in my newfound freedom. Although the guilt over how my secrets were revealed was still present, I tried to focus on the present and the opportunity to live a more authentic life. Diego, on the other hand, had disappeared from my life after the incident. The complicity we shared in those intense days vanished, leaving space for reflection and acceptance of the consequences. Over time, I decided to explore my own identity and desires without depending on external relationships. Behind me were impulsive decisions and overflowing emotions. I sought within myself the spark that I had lost so many years ago, before routine took over my life. As time passed, the lessons learned became clearer, and I discovered the importance of communication, the need to keep the flame alive in a relationship, and how routine can become a silent enemy. I learned that passion can rise from the ashes, but also that impulsive decisions can lead to unexpected consequences. The path to self-acceptance and the search for my own happiness was not easy, but it allowed me to grow in ways I never imagined. I rebuilt my home, both physically and emotionally, and found new ways to enjoy life. My days were no longer marked by monotony, but by the exploration of my own interests and the connection with those who truly shared my values. Raúl, for his part, after the separation, moved to a new house, found a group of friends with similar interests, and began to participate in social activities that were previously unknown to him. The experience of separation also taught him the vital importance of communication in relationships, a lesson he had overlooked in our marriage. The memories of both the shared moments and the painful separation have been unavoidable, yet it has given us the opportunity to grow and rediscover ourselves. Thank you for listening to this passionate story. If you want to continue enjoying and exploring other exciting stories, I invite you to subscribe to the channel. Join our community to not miss a single video. Click the subscribe button to receive updates on our upcoming stories. We are waiting for you in our next video.